Okay, thank you everyone, and I appreciate the patience. I know the meeting was supposed to start at 7, but as I said earlier, our earlier meeting caucus ran a little long. So welcome everyone for Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee for August the 14th, disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Okay, seeing none. We have consent items. Moved by Councillor Ioannidis, the bulk of the consent items. All those in favor? Opposed? And those carry. On to the public hearing matters and the Planning Act as advertised. Once more, this is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act if a person or public body does not make oral written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the proposed applications are considered. The person or public body may not be entitled to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal and may not be added as a party to a hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal. On to 5.1, which is zoning bylaw amendment application for 1154 Queens Boulevard, Sunset Hills Estate Corp. And Mr. Schneider, I think you are presenting first. When you're ready, please do so. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Mayor, and members of Council. My name is Eric Schneider, and I'm a senior planner at the City. I'm here tonight to make a recommendation for approval for a zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate a 10-unit multi-residential development. As we move to the next slide, I will first discuss the site context of the neighborhood. The site is municipally addressed as 1154 Queens Boulevard and is located on the north side of Queens Boulevard between Hahn Place and Belmont Avenue. Regional Road Westmount Road West is to the west of the subject lands. The surrounding neighborhood is comprised of a mix of low to high-rise residential, institutional uses, and parkland space. The site has a lot width of 19.8 meters, approximately 65 feet, and is approximately 0.17 hectares in area. The site is close to St. Mary's Hospital, but is not within the Heritage Conservation District. The site has close walking access to Hearth Green and a community trail leading to Lakeside Park. On the next slide, I will discuss the proposed concept. The site is proposed to be developed with a 3-story building containing 10 dwelling units. Surface parking for 17 vehicles is to be provided on site, along with walkways, landscaped areas, and an outdoor at-grade amenity area behind the building. The next slide contains the proposed zoning map, showing the subject lands as Area 1. As we move to the next slide, I will speak briefly about the current opportunity with this application. The opportunity to create 10 new 2- and 3-bedroom dwelling units, creating them on an existing site for the opportunity for gentle infill development within a neighborhood with adequate municipal services, and to contribute to the diversity of housing within the neighborhood by providing multiple dwellings in a low-rise setting. Moving now to the next slide, I will summarize the details of the zoning bylaw amendment request. To change the zoning from Res 4 to Res 5 to allow the use of multiple dwelling of more than 4 units on the lands, and to establish site-specific yard setbacks and parking lot setbacks. In summary, the proposed application represents good planning principles and is consistent with provincial, regional, and the city's planning policies. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Eric. Next up is our delegation. Councillor Johnston, if you can hold questions of staff, but I got you down, and I'll come to you first. Mr. Head? Welcome, Andrew. As you probably know, you have 5 minutes to make your delegation whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Mr. Chairman, Your Honourable Mayor, members of council and staff, my name is Andrew Head from Dryden Smith and Head Planning Consultants. I'm here on behalf of Sunset Homes. I've read Eric's staff report, and he did a fantastic job. I don't have a lot to offer. I don't want to take up your time repeating everything that he said. I would like to make note that if you paid attention to the comments on this proposal that came to the record through the Facebook page and social media, it was quite glowing. You could tell that the city people are out there and supporting developments like this. This is part of the missing middle that is not single condo developments. This is going to be that for those people who want to work and they need 2 cars that are going to need to drive to other places in the town and they can't use transit. This is going to be part of that missing middle that we are desperately in need of. I'm happy to answer any questions, and that's all I have for you tonight.
Okay. Questions? I see no questions. Just, I think you referenced the fact that there's adequate parking. For 10 units, how many parking spots are being provided? I'm seeing 15 plus visitor.
Yeah, so there's 17 spaces.
17 spaces. What's required actually under the...
I think we required 15. No, hold on. It was.
A lot less, I think.
They just changed the parking regulations. It would be 10
12.
plus the
12, yeah. That's what I was expecting, and I'm just surprised that you guys are even offering above that. So that's great.
Yeah.
Councillor Johnston, she does have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, thank you so much for coming, and I would agree that comments for the most part have been very favorable about this. I did hear, though, from a couple of local residents who did wonder about the parking requirements and had said, is there a way of taking those back and adding more green space to this instead?
So what we did, that original plan had 19 spaces on it, and we removed 2 of those spaces to accommodate better green space area.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, sorry, just wanted to, not to belabor the point, but you have this many spaces because you want this many spaces, not because staff's...
Actually, pre-sales or prior to pre-sales have shown that there is a drive and a need for people to have more parking. There's people who are going to be living in here who have children who are aging in-house, and they're going to need cars, and if we can't provide parking for them, as any of you councils know, if you travel to any places that are 65 units per hectare and you drive there on a Sunday afternoon when everybody's home, try to find parking. Never mind the summertime, but in the wintertime, parking becomes very difficult. Not everybody is going to be able to live in those situations. They're going to have to live in condos. Those condos are going to need to have parking because not everybody is going to want to be on that transit. We have to address the needs for all of the people, not just most of the people or some of the people. There is a need for people who want to have 2 cars, who are going to live there with 2 incomes, because those are the only people who are going to be able to afford a house these days, and they're going to need both the cars to drive to Toyota, to drive to Schneider's, to wherever they're going to go to be able to pay for that mortgage. So
Thank
this,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very impassioned response. Thank you.
See.
Yeah, I'm not going to belabor it, but there is an empty parking lot across the street. So I'm glad you were thoughtful about the residents' feedback, though. I'm grateful that you're hearing your neighbors' points of view. And, people are moving towards unbundling that to encourage people to move away from that. Yeah, anyway, it's a great development. It fits with the neighborhood. You're right that we need this missing middle, so I appreciate what you're bringing forward today.
And across the street from the cycling network, too.
Councillor Donnell.
What is with the feedback here?
I don't know.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I don't know if this is for you or for staff. What's at the back of the development? Are there homes or is that the park behind it?
There's single-family residential behind it.
It's a big hill? Okay. Okay, yeah, that's all. I was just curious. I can't tell by the map.
Thank you, Mr. Head.
Great, thank you.
Did you have a question? Okay. Questions of staff? Councillor Johnston, if you want to key back in, you're first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Singh. We had an email this afternoon from a resident who had some concerns around the neighboring trees on the residential lots of either side of the property being cut down. I'm wondering if Mr. Schneider can perhaps comment on that.
Thank you. Through the chair, the tree management plan that was prepared was prepared for the first concept where there was actually 20 parking spaces, 19 plus a barrier-free. So with this second concept, it reduces the parking spaces by 3 spaces. It allows for more green space at the back and more preservation of trees. And I did see the letter, and in terms of concerns about trees on neighboring properties, removal of those would still require consent letters from those property owners. Like this zoning bylaw amendment doesn't give the applicant approval to remove trees on neighboring sites. They would still have to get permission if that were the case. But yeah, it's going to be minimal off-site tree removals.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question about the setbacks. So in the report, it says that the average setbacks in the neighborhood are 6 to 18 meters. And then it goes on to say, but here we propose 4.9 and we're going to accept it. So it seems to me that usually we try to keep in, you know, a similar setback to the adjacent property. So I'm just puzzled as to why it wouldn't be 6 meters. If, you know, if we want to keep within that huge range of 6 to 18 meters, why we're reducing it even more.
Thank you. Through the chair, the point in the staff report was to demonstrate that there isn't a consistent building line on this block between Hahn and Belmont. The range between 6 and 18 is quite wide. So I think the preservation of an established street line is more important on streets that have a more consistent street line. And understanding that the multiple dwelling is a different use and it's a different building typology, different front yard setbacks can be more appropriate in certain scenarios. So if this were a different block that had a really consistent front yard setback, we might not consider this reduction. But given the site-specific context of this north side of this block not having a consistent building line, staff felt it was appropriate. The other thing it does is allow for more space at the rear of the site for the amenity space behind the building, the parking space, and the green space. So if we did require them to go further back, it would be less amenity space behind the building, essentially, or less parking area, or less green space.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that seems to be all the questions of staff as well. Can I get a mover? I'll give it to Councillor Johnston to award. Councillor Johnston, moved by you. For comments, Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you. I think that this is a great site, and I think it really is addressing that missing middle that we need to be looking at how we're integrating buildings into our neighborhoods. It's on a main street, and I think that the design looks great. I like how you've taken into how the developer has taken into account people's comments on how they're needing to use it to have adult children perhaps live with them as well, and a need for extra space and thoughts around that as well. So I think it's a very thoughtful development, and it's more of the type that we need to be doing in our community. So thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. This is a great use of land, great intensification, responsible, and as you said, Mr. Head, it's housing for all. This is for people who need missing middle housing and need to commute to where they are working. So thank you for filling that need in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. I don't see anyone else. I'll just make a couple of comments. I think what was missed out of the questions was the number of 3-bedroom and 2-bedroom units in this development. I think 3 is the dominant number. And so it shows that the market will build based on what the market wants. So where there is a need for more intensified 3-bedroom and 2-bedroom units and more parking is required, that's being built accordingly. The developer could have gone possibly for additional units, but knowing what's out there and what they can sell quicker and easiest, and that's what they're building. That's not to say that lesser parking numbers aren't necessarily a bad thing either. Again, if the market can support that and those units can sell and there's a reduced cost to the ownership of entry point in certain developments, that makes sense as well. I think this also is a good example of, as Councillor Schneider has said, good infill that's for missing middle. It utilizes large landmass in an area that typically does have low-rise housing. It's not too intrusive, but provides additional living accommodations of new individuals coming into this neighborhood and having an equitable access to an amazing neighborhood. Great parks, hospital nearby, proximity to the downtown core. And that goes to show that we should leverage and support development applications that are for the missing middle that may necessarily not only be in the MTSAs, but in the peripheral as well. Because this site is more than close enough for walking distance to the core and the LRT stops as well. So all in all, I think it's a good development. With that, all those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you very much. And this would go to council to be ratified. Next item up for discussion is the speed limit review. And that would be for school zones and Bingaman Center Drive. Hello, Aaron. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good evening. To you, Chair, I can provide opening remarks. If
Please. Yeah, I
required.
wasn't sure. I wasn't staying here, so I wasn't sure if you're going to speak or not. Go ahead.
Thank you. So good evening to the Chamber. My name is Aaron McCrimmon-Jones, Manager of Transportation Safety and Policy. Through motions brought forth by Council in March 2023, staff were directed to investigate the appropriate speed limit and time of day restrictions in school zones within City of Kitchener neighborhoods, as well as appropriate speed limits in school zones equipped with automated speed enforcement, and further to review the potential for increasing the posted speed limit on Bingaman Center Drive from 50 kilometers per hour to 60 kilometers per hour. Based on staff's review, changes to the current static 30 kilometer per hour speed limit in school zones as approved by Council in 2021 are not being recommended due to the community function of school properties and the presence of children and other vulnerable street users throughout the day and throughout the year, as well as maintaining consistency with our neighboring cities, including the City of Cambridge, the City of Waterloo, and the City of Guelph. Staff's recommendation for Bingaman Center Drive is to maintain the current 50 kilometer per hour speed limit. Existing conditions on Bingaman Center Drive, including on-road cycling facilities, slower moving truck traffic, transit service, pedestrian crossings, and business community concerns regarding speeding and street safety, staff do not recommend an increase to the current posted speed limit. I'd be happy to answer any questions or take comments from council. Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
I'm going to ring back in. I'm just trying to get my...
Sure. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Mr. McCrimmon-Jones, thanks for all the work that went into this. One of the things that I hear about and I observe is the lack of consistency of school zone speeds and the signage. Like, for example, on regional roads, there's signage that says the speed limit is 40 between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., Monday to Friday, September to June. And but in other zones, there isn't that. The zone remains what it is, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, you know, I heard from a constituent of mine who was going in front of Franklin School doing 40 on Christmas morning and got a ticket. So I'm just wondering the philosophy behind keeping it the 30 speed at all hours, all days.
Through you, Chair, to the councillor, So I'll touch on two different things. The region of Waterloo, they're running a pilot in their school zones, looking at both static, meaning 40 kilometers an hour at all times, as well as testing time of day and time of year restrictions. They're planning on bringing the results of that pilot back to their council in the fall. However, the region of Waterloo operates very different roads than Kitchener's neighborhood streets. The region's arterial roadways are designed to move significant volumes of traffic throughout the entire region, whereas area municipalities operate collector and local streets within neighborhoods that serve a number of different functions, provide access to homes, front lawns, neighborhood amenities. And additionally, the City of Kitchener has adopted a complete streets methodology for the design of our roadways in our neighborhoods, which is why we are promoting and supporting a 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit in our school zones, because of the different function they serve versus regional roads. So we are working with the region, and we look forward to hearing the results of their pilot. But our methodology and recommendation will remain the same regardless, that our school zone should be 30 kilometers an hour because of the neighborhood context.
So if it comes back, though, that their pilot was successful with the restricted hours, would we consider that?
Through the chair, the councillor, we'll be open to hearing the results of their pilot study. But again, because the neighborhood function, and we see our schools serving as summer schools, parks, recreation areas, all throughout the year and throughout the day, we would not recommend a time of day or a 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit in our school zones.
Yeah, I think there's confusion. Like, a lot of residents, they're driving a road and may not know, oh, this is a city road, this is a regional road. And I think there is confusion out there with that. I mean, I know the regional roads because Chicopee Hills Public School is on two major regional arterial roads, and there are issues with the speed. So I do give you that, but I just want to say I'm just really concerned about the consistency of that. And I think we've got a lot of roads where they are 40, and so they are consciously driving slower now. So I think that's important to factor in as well.
There's quite a few that have keyed in. I think there's a total of 8 members of council. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, certainly in the downtown core, I have no problem with the school zones being at 30 kilometers an hour. I think most of them are already, but I think that's a good arrangement. But I wanted to speak more to Bingham and Center Drive. And I think keeping it at 50 is good, but I mean, is that going to cut it? I mean, it's a pretty wide street, right? And cars do go quite quickly. Are there any other traffic calming measures? I think it said there are 2 islands that are going to go in, but are there any other plans for that road?
Through the chair to the councillor, more traditional forms of traffic calming can be very difficult on a road that is designed such as Bingham and Center Drive. It's very wide, it's 5 lanes. It does carry a high volume of vehicle traffic, at least for a City of Kitchener road. So we would rely on enforcement, improving pedestrian facilities, educating drivers. Those would be the types of tools that we would focus on. Adding vertical measures like speed humps or speed cushions would not be appropriate on this type of street. But to the points you've made, it has ranked very high in our Vision Zero modeling, which is why we're adding 2 additional pedestrian refuge islands at areas that we know pedestrians have been struck in the past. And we've worked with GRT and other stakeholders on those locations.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Ravenovich.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to follow up on the school zone issue, because I quite frankly do think it's problematic in its present setup. I mean, many municipalities that I drive through, including, as has been noted, regional roads, do have time of day and time of year restriction on it. And I guess I could potentially understand the rationale around after-hours usage and so on, but that 30-kilometer only applies if there happens to be a park attached to a school, which often there is, but there's many parks throughout the city where that's not the case, and then the 40-kilometer would apply year-round. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand why the after-hour logic holds around after-hour uses in those parks, but we don't take that same approach in other parks.
Through the chair to the councillor, school zones are treated differently than other community areas because of the high volume of children and other vulnerable street users. But I will note that we know that schools are used for after-hours programming. They are used for summer schools, we hold community meetings there. So we know that they are used likely more for after-hours programming than maybe some other neighborhood amenities. But we do want to create that consistency in our school zones and as well as be consistent with our neighboring municipalities. Through the pilot project that we ran that formed the basis for the neighborhood speed limit recommendation to council, we saw greater speed reductions in the school zones in terms of a percentage than we did in the broader neighborhood. So drivers responded much more positively to that 30-kilometer-an-hour reduction than they did in the rest of the neighborhood. So we are seeing drivers take note of that.
So I guess as a follow-up, you know, and I'm a full supporter of what we're doing in the school zones during school times. I've advocated, you know, for it since the beginning. But I guess what I struggle with is that if folks start feeling that, you know, this is about more than safety, they start, quite frankly, questioning the overall approach we take on a lot of our bylaws. And that, I think, can become a bigger loss to the community and to society than making the adjustment. And that's where I think we're running that risk, because you have folks who are saying, you know, I'm driving by, let's say, a regional school at 11 o'clock at night, nothing happens to me. If I happen to drive by a school that's on a city street and I'm going, you know, 10 over and going 40, same as I would on a regional street, all of a sudden I'm getting a ticket. And so there's a lot of resentment that ends up building up. You know, and then I think about, you know, as we deal with that, you know, it's different than, for example, and again, I think ASC does a much better job in terms of helping with this and it doesn't make sense to put a police officer there because of the costs associated with it. But, you know, in those instances, most police officers don't give tickets until you hit 16 over. And so all of that is playing in terms of the public's receptiveness towards these, you know, towards our use of this. And so you know, I do think that we really should likely be leaning towards, you know, moving in the direction. We may want to hold off until we see what happens with the regional roads and defer it potentially. I'm not moving that at this time. But I do think in this particular instance, it's not working well with the community. You know, and I understand, you know, staff has their perspective on this, but I think we need to find that right balance. And right now, I'm not sure that we're there.
Councillor Michaud.
I have comments, not questions. Can I speak now?
We all are. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I'm a little perplexed that we're even having this conversation. I mean, it was just a year or so ago that we were all, you know, really excited we were going into 30-kilometer school zones for the sake of the safety of our children in this community. And now we're having a discussion to bring it only during school hours when, as to Mr. McCormick-Jones' comment, this is school area is a playground area. It doesn't matter what road it's on. It still is safety for kids. And I look at that, the kids will cross the road safely as best they can. And the traffic will be 30. And to your report, 30 kilometers, it's less likely to have fatal or really serious injuries than 40 or 50. So we're going to do a 30-kilometer Monday to Friday during the school days. And then Saturday and Sundays, we're going to open it up to 40, which they're going to go 50, and kids are going to do the same thing they're always doing. So we're sitting here going to change the whole, like thinking of changing this whole plan that we had, and not even taking into consideration, all due respect to all my colleagues here, but we got to take consideration the safety of our children, and that has to be paramount. In a Dune South area, this is the top concern I get, and I will say weekly, from residents that live in a school zone where people are still speeding, and it's 30. So we're still challenging this. We're still trying to fix this, and now we're going to start juggling it for some people that think it's just not right because they can't look at the speed limit and say it's 30, go 30. You know? No, sometimes there is. There was one. But anyways, so I'm talking. So I think what we're doing is we're playing around with something that we made a policy of, and it was working. And it doesn't. I mean, I'll admit I was guilty of going down Franklin Ave, and unless there's a car in front of me slowing me down, I'm going 40. I'm not even, like some days I don't even look, and I really shock myself because I don't. It's going to take a few tickets for people to realize this is a school zone, this is the speed I always have to go. We're never going to change the speeding problem that we have in this community, and this is community-wide. We will never change this if we start dickering back and forth with the speed limits. Thanks.
Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm just processing. I think I'm going to leave my school zone comments for after, but I'm going to focus on Bingham Centre Drive, since the ward I represent brought this forward. I guess my biggest concern is that, well, there's twofold. I brought it forward. I always personally, anecdotally, I'm not a traffic professional, and staff are, but I always anecdotally thought the speed limit was too slow. But what really opened my eyes was canvassing, and the number of people, it was actually quite shocking, that lived throughout the ward that specifically, spontaneously, when you're knocking on the door, brought up the speed limit on Bingham Centre Drive as an issue. So I guess the first thing I would put to staff is, do we think it's reasonable when Bingham Centre Drive basically is an extension of Lackner Boulevard, which is a narrower road, and the speed limit is 60 kilometers an hour. Victoria Street, which is adjacent, runs parallel to Bingham Centre Drive and is at least as wide, narrower in parts and at least maybe as wide in other parts, is 60 all the way down. Why? I just can't understand why 60 kilometers an hour on this specific road with its width is more of a danger than Victoria Street. And I understand there was cycling infrastructure that was put in, but Victoria Street was 60 kilometers an hour 50 years before the cycling infrastructure was put in. Lackner Boulevard was 60 kilometers an hour, however many years it's been there, since before cycling infrastructure was put in. So I guess my question to staff is, if I respectfully disagree with staff's position of maintaining it at 50, and I were inclined to move a motion to direct staff to increase the speed limit to 60, are there areas of the roads or other measures that you would want to put in terms of safety measures? Because I'm not a professional. Are there any blind spots where you might want to put in there's a brief corner near a bus stop where you might want to say slow down to 50 because pedestrians are coming? How would staff respond to that sort of, contrary motion?
Through the chair to the councillor, we made our best effort to explain the challenges with Bingham Centre Drive in the staff report. Some of the other roads that you've mentioned have separated cycling facilities and better pedestrian facilities, which Bingham Centre Drive is lacking. I will note that Victoria starts at 70 outside of the city, transitions to 60, and then to 50 as it gets closer into the downtown beyond the expressway. But it does have better pedestrian facilities, separating those vulnerable street users from fast-moving traffic. The 85th percentile speed on Bigham Center Drive is already 75 kilometers per hour. So we know drivers are currently not obeying the 50 kilometer per hour posted speed limit by a significant amount. Increasing that to 60, we feel, is going to exasperate that, and we have a history of pedestrians being struck and a significant number of collisions here, which is why it ranked so high on our modeling, our Vision Zero modeling. So we would take direction from council on that, but it is not something that we're currently supporting.
In terms of the location and the pedestrian injuries, my understanding is staff have built 2 mid-road pedestrian islands to alleviate that.
Through the chair to the councillor, that's correct. As a pedestrian crossing, you're still crossing 5 lanes of live traffic. Fast-moving traffic, and we're talking approximately 15,000 vehicle trips per day. So we want to make that as easy and as safe for pedestrians as we can, because we know that they're accessing the bus stops. There are tourist and visitor destinations there, like the brewery and Bigham's. We are doing what we can, given the road conditions, to improve safety, but we wouldn't support the speed limit increase.
The data wasn't in the report, but do you know offhand the approximate percentiles at 50 or 60 kilometers an hour for Bigham Center Drive?
Through the chair, could you clarify the question?
Do you know what percentile people travel at 50 and or 60?
Through the chair, apologies, I don't have that data in front of me.
And I guess my other concern is, are there any other roads in the city where we see 15%, 85 percentile, right? Is there any other roads in the city where we see 15% of travelers driving in excess of 50% higher than the speed limit?
Through the chair, in terms of City of Kitchener roads under our jurisdiction, Bigham Center Drive is somewhat of an anomaly. We don't see speeds that high.
See,
it's again, the design of the road that...
Yeah, and again, it's not your specific problem, but that's the way I see it. This is an us problem, not a driver's problem. And until we do something about it, in terms of finding a way to slow people down, or acknowledging that, yes, 75 is too fast, but in my opinion, 60 is not. It's an enforcement issue that we don't have control over. So I'm going to think on it while I listen to the balance of members of the committee. And by the same token, I have to say I am inclined to support the notion of, when it comes to school zones, respectfully, that it should be 40 kilometers an hour in my mind outside of school hours. I apologize. I get the safety factor, I get the safety issue, but on one hand, there's a confusion between parkland, like anywhere where there's a park, in theory, it should be 30 then, which also doesn't make sense. But frankly, driving down Franklin Boulevard at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night and having to go 30 kilometers an hour it's ridiculous, honestly. And I get that the resident frustration about that. So I think we need to make it safe when safety is required.
Thank you. Councillor Inez, are you ready, or do you want to come back later? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair Singh. That review that the region's conducting, when is that anticipated to be completed?
Through the chair, our understanding is by the end of 2023.
Okay, so it's way past the time when the school year will be starting in September. I've been listening to some of the comments that have been made around here, and Councillor Avery, I'll put that motion for you on the table with regards to increasing the speed limit to 60. I also will put forward the motion to have the school zones to have that time limit similar to the region. And then in addition, I want to put one school zone in particular in my ward to be permanently 40 kilometers all the time, which is West Heights Drive. And the reason why I'm saying that is I think we really put a hammer to this 30 kilometer in school zones, because in my mind, what I see is a lot of aggravation. What I see is a lot of vandalism with regards to the camera equipment. And every school is going to get a camera now. So that's going to effectively, I think, reduce the need to be 30 kilometers in my mind. But I won't push that for other wards. I'm only concerned about my ward because that is single-handedly one of the things I heard over and over and over and over. And if I can't control that in my own ward, a certain time, a certain speed limit that the majority of my residents that I represent are requesting, then what am I here for? So, that's I'm putting those forward, and with all due respect, I have the ultimate respect for your department, and I have the ultimate respect for everything that you do, Aaron and Barry and the whole team, and you know that. And so this is, please don't take any offense to what I'm putting up here as any indication as that I think you are doing a bad job or that I strongly feel, and I know the argument everyone's going to say consistency, but really there isn't any consistency when we're different from the region and we're doing our own thing. And I know the argument I might hear about, well, you just want to do West Heights, and where's the that's not consistent. Well, if it's still 30 kilometers in every other school zone, then that's the consistency that you get. So when they go through West Heights, they're going to think it's 30, but really it's 40. So the reality is they're going to go slower regardless whether it's a posted speed limit, but it helps my residents that are affected on a day-to-day basis traveling up that hill and dealing with the 30 kilometer. That whole ward has made it pretty loud and clear to me. So that's where I'm going.
Thank you, Councillor Inez. Let's edit that. You do care about all the wards, but your statement stays the same. Yes, there you go. Okay. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Councillor Singh, and through you. I think that tonight you might have a number of different amendments to deal with, so you got your pen handy. I would like to propose that we vote on Bingaman Drive separately than the school zones. I'd like to put that forward. I don't know if I need to speak to that now when I do that, or...
Talk about the whole thing.
Sorry?
Yeah, speak about the whole thing.
Speak about the whole thing? Okay. Yeah, no, I would agree with Councillor Davey on this, that it's always a surprise to me that Bingaman Drive is 50 when I'm driving there, and when I am going at 50, which, by the way, there is someone that's doing that, so that would, hopefully that is on the radar there. Everyone else is going past me very, very quickly on there, and I would agree that the median speed being 75 on there, it seems very unnatural to not drive at least 60 there. I find that challenging. I think these two issues, frankly, are very separate, and I would like to see them voted on separately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dunno.
Thank you, Chair Singh, and I'd just like to make a point that I wasn't on council a couple of years ago when you guys changed the speed limits, but to quickly respond to Councillor Ioannidis, my concern, and I understand that your constituents are on you about that speed. My concern is if we do it for your ward, everyone around this horseshoe is going to be getting calls tonight saying, well, he did it over there, so we need to do it here. And so that's my only concern. I understand that, sometimes, the calls kind of come excessively, and so I couldn't support that. But I do definitely support the different time zones, or the 30 in between the school time, in between the school time frame, and then 40 outside. I also support the 60 on Bingaman's. My question to you, Aaron, what does the data look like? Because I know your department is driven by data. So what does the data look like when we do adjust the hours? On both ends. So we adjust it from 50 to 60 on Bingaman's, and then we adjust the timing on by the school zones.
Through the chair, I have not been involved with a speed limit increase in my time here, but when we're looking at the current overage of about from the posted to the 85th percentile speed, We could probably assume the same if we were to increase it to 60. We're going to see speeds 10 to 20 kilometers per hour over the posted speed limit. In terms of the hours, that's why the region's going through that pilot, to understand what the impacts are of a static speed limit versus time of day, time of year in school zones. We don't have data to support that. But what I would just mention quickly is that there are far more schools in our region on municipal roads under the jurisdiction of Waterloo, Cambridge, and Kitchener than there are schools on regional roads. So the consistency there, we would be less consistent, given that we wouldn't be meeting what Cambridge and Waterloo are doing.
Okay, and I can appreciate, the speed on the roads will probably increase a little bit. I guess the data I'm looking at is what will the fatalities look like? Do you have a snapshot of what the collisions, if they will increase, if fatalities will increase? That's the kind of data I'm looking for an answer.
Perhaps if Mr. Weidman can have a say as well.
Yeah, through the chair. So there's an emerging body of knowledge that's coming out of the United States. So the original assumptions were that a vehicle was about 2,000 pounds and 30 kilometers an hour. If a vehicle was traveling at 30 kilometers an hour and you were struck by it, you had a 95% of survival without serious injury, so only a 5% chance of serious injury or death. Because electric vehicles are much heavier, almost twice the mass of conventional vehicles, all of that science is sort of out the window at this point in time. So even a safe speed limit of 30 kilometers an hour isn't so true anymore. And so the numbers haven't been fully calculated at this point in time, but because kinetic energy is a function of mass times velocity, obviously it's going to change quite a bit. And so that is a risk that is growing in the transportation field that council should be aware of when they're making any changes around speed limits. And so when you increase to 40, I don't know what under the old science, I can't remember what the chance of serious injury or death is. It exponentially increases though as speed increases. I don't know if Mr. McCrimmon-Jones has the number for 40 kilometers an hour.
Go ahead, Eric.
Through the chair, so the old science, not taking into consideration that vehicles are getting bigger and heavier, being electrified, a vehicle traveling at 30 kilometers an hour, if it was to hit a pedestrian, the survival rate is 90%. 40 kilometers an hour, that reduces to 70%. And at 50 kilometers an hour, there's a survival rate of 15%. So it is very much exponential. The stopping distance is the same. At 30 kilometers an hour, a vehicle takes 30 meters to stop. At 40 kilometers an hour, that increases by 15 meters to 45 meters. And at 50 kilometers an hour, it's a 62-meter stopping distance, which is significant when we're talking about trying to avoid collisions and serious injury.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Schneider, have you already spoken, or? Okay, all right. So I see a number that have rung back in for the second round. I just want to ask my question, if that's okay. Just hearing Aaron's response, where my, I guess, rebuttal to it lies is more so, I agree with Councillor Michaud. Of course, safety of our youth and our children is paramount. And the fact that the region is looking at expanding the number of enforcement cameras across the board, and in future time having all schools covered in that area. If that enforces a speed limit at the 30 kilometers an hour during school hours, or giving probably a little bit of a window before and after, what really is the concern then in respect to that? So we're still ensuring the reduced speed limits when it concerns pedestrians, especially school-going children, during the day. What concern is in the evening, really? Like, where's the real issue with that? And when we're talking about consistency, consistency is the 40 kilometers an hour. You're driving 40 kilometers an hour everywhere else, all except when you come to a school zone. And I think that's where a lot of the, concern that's arising from members of council who have heard from residents where they do get dinged. It's not necessarily during the school hour time. It's well past that. Anecdotally, I had one resident, she was complaining it was 11 p.m. And they're like, well, who am I harming at that point when I was driving at 40? Not beyond that, she was driving. 40? If you can answer that.
Through to you, Chair. The concern is that schools don't stop functioning as community hubs at 3 o'clock when the bell rings. They continue as night schools, summer camps, summer schools, nighttime programming, and we want to treat school zones differently. And we do that through our signage and through our bylaws. And that's the reason for the recommendation to maintain the 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit.
Okay, I appreciate that. I wish the schools did the uptake of allowing usage of their spaces for all of that activity, and it was happening across the board. I really wish it did, but to date, it's not as much. But aside from that, our community centers serve the same function. Our parks, which we want to make sure that there's ongoing animation, especially during the summer months, activities, events, whatever. That's also a concern. So why not the issue there as opposed to just schools?
Through the chair to the councillor, we could take direction from council to look at all of those community amenities and look at lowering speed limits, and we could do the work to bring that to you. The other thing to mention is that the region, as well as the province, they're looking at community safety zones and better understanding what a community safety zone is and how it can be applied to other areas for the use of automated speed enforcement. So we could very well see automated speed enforcement expanding outside of school zones in the city of Kitchener and the region, and looking at lower speed limits in those other areas if they are a concern to council. The other thing I'll mention is that whenever we make a safety improvement to a road, we look at the impact to all street users, including drivers. And when we look at the impact to travel time through, for example, the West Heights school zone, there's about a 6-second travel time delay if you're traveling 30 versus 40 kilometers an hour. So it takes about 6 seconds longer to drive 30 kilometers an hour versus 40 kilometers an hour. And in our professional opinion, the trade-off for the survival rate that increases exponentially if somebody is hit at 30 kilometers an hour is worth that trade-off when we're talking about safety. So I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. This is not new science about, of course, the fatality rates and depending on the speed. This is data that's been prevalent for quite a long time. It's very costly for communities to do hard infrastructure, speed bumps or road narrowing. So why so, again, is a thought process changing about reducing speed limits, and it was not a concern before?
Through the chair to the councillor, yes. Or through the chair to the chair, yes. I think you're right that the thought process and the methodology and the strategy around this is very much changing, and council has proven that through the adoption of things like complete streets. We're redesigning our roads as well as becoming a Vision Zero community to try and get to zero fatalities and serious injuries on our roads. So I would agree with that statement that the mindset is very much changing around roadway safety.
Okay. Now, the reason why I said it is, again, just if the committee will allow me to make a quick comment as well. The way you were answering, I don't want it to be perceived that as some that are putting forward their concerns about how we are posting the speed limits and the duration for the time, as we're getting feedback and pushback from our residents and saying, hey, you know what, it doesn't make sense during school hours. It's not that there's lack of caring about safety. We've all cared about safety. We cared before, we care now. It's just the fact that there's now a easier mechanism to enforce through the enforcement cameras, as opposed to in the past where we could really reduce speeding beyond the 50 or 40 that was before with more physical infrastructure, but that costed more, so we couldn't do it everywhere. So I think the caring hasn't changed. It's just different mechanisms of enforcement has changed. That's all. Thank you. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. One of the things that comes up too on Bingaman Center Drive regarding safety is access and egress from events at Bingaman's. It seems like there's a high volume of traffic about 30 minutes before an event and then like 15 minutes after. it's difficult turning left, getting out. Would we consider some sort of a stoplight that could only be in use during those times? And I think of this also on Ottawa Street as people are exiting an event at the auditorium. It's quite a busy time, and a lot of chances are taken by people wanting to make that left turn or right turn out of the odd parking lot. So, if safety is a concern, is that something that we would consider, or stoplights function of the region?
Through the chair to the councillor, my colleague, Mr. Cronkite, is looking at the possibility of a traffic signal on Bigman Center Drive at one of the entrances. So I would leave that to him to provide you more information, but it is being investigated.
Okay, great. If I could get that offline and maybe information on Ottawa Street as well, that'd be great.
Mayor Rabinovich.
Thanks. Thanks very much. On the, I do. I'm glad that Councillor Johnson asked that we separate the two, because I do think they're two separate issues. I also think, at some point, and while I know there's been some solutions in terms of the mid-cross boulevard or whatever that's being put in place, I know how challenging, because I go to Binghamton's a fair bit for different events, how challenging it can be during certain times of day to exit there, and so it is something that probably needs to be looked at because of the volume of people leaving there in terms of potential signalization, even though I recognize it may not warrant it all the time. On the issue of school zones, I would ask that we actually defer that issue until we hear from the region, because right now one of our issues is that we're not consistent with the region. And if the region's going to go in a different direction and we go in a different direction, then we're going to be inconsistent again, which I think presents a bigger problem. And I would concur that whatever approach we take needs to be an approach that we take citywide. Like this can't be sort of one situation in one ward, or for the same reasons that there needs to be some consistency. And if it's safe in one ward, then we want it to be safe in another ward. So it's about finding that right balance. So at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, I would ask that we, instead of making a decision today, that then we would potentially have to go and reconsider. I think it makes sense to hold off until the region's done their review of this issue.
That's fine. I don't have an amendment yet on the table, so when I do, then I'll take your deferral, and the deferral will take precedence. But if you can ask for a clarification question on you, and I'm not disagreeing, but the fact that the region, although they're undertaking this review, there are far fewer schools on regional roads than they are in comparison to the city streets. Would you be able to relay what the sentiment or kind of comments that are being received from Kitchener City Council and committee members, so that can help inform their work as well?
Yep.
Like as a sense of direction that may be leading on our perspective.
Certainly that's something I would convey. I mean, to be honest, tonight's the first time I heard that the regional staff are reviewing this. That could be just getting done at a staff level, and it'll be coming to council later this fall. So.
Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Point of clarification. Thank you, Chair Singh, for raising that, because that was going to be my question, but I guess I would just put back to the mayor, if I could, if you're going to be, I don't know if you want formal direction from committee or not, but like my personal sense is that without the benefit of the region's data and their decision, my personal sense is that, once we implemented measures, we got a different response than, like once they're in place, you get a very different response from the residents than when it's theoretical and it comes to the council. So I guess what I'm getting at is, do you want a vote from this committee, or do you think it would be useful, a vote from this committee saying, pending their data, that we would support 30 kilometers an hour only during school hours would be our preference, but we're looking for consistency? Or do you think that would just complicate the issue.
I think what maybe staff can indicate to regional staff, I would suggest, is that there's interest on our council, and staff could come back with some information, and we want to take a position as a council at that point in time. We can. I think to take one hypothetically without having the benefit of their report and their information might not be the most prudent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so my hope would be that, of course, staff would be in consultation through their process, and if they seem to be leading in a different direction, and at that point, that they can be inquired to see if a recommendation would be helpful from Kitchener Council as well. Right.
Through the chair, yes, we can certainly keep you updated on the direction that the region is going.
Okay. Councillor Michaud.
Mr. McCrimmon-Jones, can you repeat the amount of time it takes to go through a 30-kilometer school zone? How many seconds a driver loses in their time?
Through the chair to the councillor, so for the West Heights Drive school zone, driving 40 kilometers an hour takes 18 seconds. Driving 30 kilometers an hour takes 24 seconds for a difference of 6 seconds.
So for 6 seconds, we're going to change this, something that we put in place for 6 seconds for people who are complaining that they have to slow down and lose 6 seconds out of their life at 11 o'clock at night. I'm just gobsmacked, really, that we're even having this conversation. I would never, if there was any resident, I will say this right here in Ward 4, that complained to me about a 30-kilometer school zone and they want it to be 40 at 11 o'clock or on the summer months, whatever, I would never entertain it. I will say this right now, because we did this for the sake of, again, the safety of our children, and I certainly hope my council colleagues will reconsider what their direction they're going in. Thank you.
I share your, I appreciate, not share, I appreciate your perspectives, and I think the committee does as well, but I think we're all coming from advocacy as we have to represent our own respective areas. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you.
Actually, just 1 second. Councillor Deneau, have you spoken yet? Oh, you have. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Just wanted to make a couple of comments. I think if you're that passionate about 30 kilometers at 11 o'clock at night, it should be 30 kilometers throughout the city. That's how I would feel. Because if you really want true safety, that would be the real route to go, in my opinion. But just in the perspective of my ward, literally you go one way in my ward, and it's 40 kilometers for the school zone. And then you go the other way, and it's 30 kilometers in the school zone. So I don't know how you can tell me that that doesn't make sense to me. Like, that makes sense. It's supposed to make sense to me. Regardless, what I've spoken to many of you here, and many of you were all in agreement with the time limits in my mind, that it was not conducive to what you heard at the doors and what you heard what your community is. So now you're going to tell, now you want to wait to see what the region says, and if the region says otherwise, so you're not going to want to help out your residents for theoretically kids getting killed in the streets. Like, come on.
I do agree with you. No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying I agree with you that, Councillor Ioannidis, if you can frame your comments not necessarily as a formal argument, more specific to what you're...
Well, I just saying, if we wait to the region and they go otherwise, you can't really make a good decision based on what your residents were asking for.
Thank you. Thank you for reframing that, and that makes sense to what you're advocating. You still have more time. Okay. Councillor Deneau, again, before you say that, again, there is support, and I think others have commented that there is support to what you're saying. It's just that, irrespective, if you were to put that motion forward, and I'll frame it, I see it as a motion on the table anyways, Mayor Voinovich has already mentioned that he's going to ask for a deferral motion. Pending the deferral motion, then we can argue or comment. Councillor Denell.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Just a quick question. Of the school zones, are they all the same length between point A and point B?
Through the chair to the councillor, it depends on the frontage, if there's parkland there. Anecdotally, probably around 100 to 150 meters on average. West Heights Drive is about 200 meters, but in that range.
And so you derive the 6 seconds of savings or of extra time based on the 100 to 150 meters?
Through the chair, no, we looked at West Heights Drive specifically.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
But quick takeoff, it would be similar, depending on the length of the school zone, but you could assume somewhere between 3 and 6 seconds.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, that seemed to be all the questions and comments of staff. I'll make a quick comment, and then I'll come to the deferral motion. And then I'm guessing there is a motion from Councillor Davey regarding Bingham Center Drive. We're all very passionate about this because we all care. There's no question. We all care about the safety of our residents in our community. This council wouldn't be so committed constantly talking about speed reduction, speed calming in our respective neighborhoods if we didn't care about the safety. I think what's at question is here ensuring that, you know, the direction that we take with enforcement cameras in school zones, there's a sense of common sense to it. Like Councillor Ioannidis has said, if you really wanted, in the truest form, ensure safety of pedestrians, it would be to reduce speeds significantly. Because from what the data says, if you're struck at 30 kilometers an hour, it's 80% chances of survival or 90%, which is far better than anything else. But again, that doesn't necessarily make sense for what a city our size with the congestion of growing population, the geography of it all, for us to really realistically have 30 kilometers an hour across the board. Where the concern seems to be relayed by those that are asking for speed limits to be staged according to when the safety is necessary during school hours, and when it's not necessarily a concern during evenings, weekends, summer, holidays, is the fact that most people, again, as they're driving 40 kilometers an hour, when it's not during a school hour, the assumption that most people would have is it's probably going to be 40 kilometers an hour. It's consistent driving. And we're really creating more of a speed trap. Up until everyone, and if that's the direction we want to go, and that's fine, we're going to have a lot of irate people. Up until everyone gets a ticket once or twice, people will continue making that mistake because it's very natural. And that may be okay. But again, for many, that's not something that they're willing, a hard-handed way of learning how to be more mindful of speed signs. Many would feel that's a very heavy-handed, regressive way of enforcing. So I think that's the question at hand. I think we're all agreeing, but coming at it from very different directions. But anyways, we have a deferral on the table. Is it a deferral or a motion? Because there's no motion. So do you want to present as a motion that you want? Okay, and I can add amendments, but I'm assuming that staff have already taken to...
Bring it back.
Okay, that's fine, and with additional caveat that staff will continue liaison with regional staff and take the comments. Even though we're not taking a public position, it's not a council direction or committee direction, but take the comments around this meeting to regional staff as they proceed with their undertaking of their review. Okay. All right, Councillor Davey, did you want to speak to the deferral or the motion that...
Yeah, so I'm not sure how quickly, Ms. Almerson, I sent you a quick email trying to figure it out for the motion, but hopefully covering off both. But yes, I would bring forward that motion. Well, actually, I'll just read it. Well, she brings up on the screen. So Okay, I wrote this very quickly, sorry. The staff be directed to report back at the next council meeting with an increase to the speed limit on Bingham and Center Drive to 60 kilometers per hour, considering any other suggested signage changes or other measures to reduce hotspot areas of concern would be the first one. And the second one, I think capturing the intent, is that staff return with suggested school hours timing during which school zone speed limits may be restricted to 30 kilometers an hour but 40 kilometers an hour outside of those hours in tandem with regional discussions.
Okay, thank you for reading it out, but just in case we missed something.
If that's complicating it, then you can drop that second part and just say, I have staff report back. That's
No, that's okay, but just seeing it, Madam Clerk, it came on the screen that it disappeared.
Through the chair, I apologize. It was a previous motion that I thought we were going to be addressing, and I didn't get this motion until right now, so you just need to give me 2 seconds.
Oh, no problem. Okay, all right. You read it kind of fast, so we can read it and digest it, and then, yes, if some have questions or concerns, then they can articulate. Just waiting on the motion that Councillor Davey has sent forward so that we can see it on screen. Go ahead.
I guess I'm just a little confused because I didn't move deferral because I thought we weren't dealing with the 40-kilometer school zone issue, and now we are in some way, and simply ask that staff bring it back. Like, I'm prepared to deal with Bingham and Center Drive. If council wants to deal with it, then I'm back inclined to move the deferral that I originally was looking to move.
Comes up, you'll see it.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I can speak to it. Sorry, I read it quickly, but that's fine. That's my intention. I just wrote in tandem with the regional discussion, so basically staff would report back. But that's fine if I just want to make sure it doesn't get forgotten or lost. And so unless we have a formal motion or a deferral.
And I think that would be.
It'll get added onto the list of outstanding items regardless.
Yeah, that's fine. So when it gets brought up on the screen, you can basically ignore the second motion then, as long as that's understood.
But to Councillor Davies' point, it does articulate a message that there is interest and discussion around this council regarding the changes as outlined by Councillor Davey. And although we are just choosing to defer to make a decision on that up until the review. So rather than it being articulated and explained by staff, it's very clear and something that's already put forward as a motion by Councillor Davey. But I mean, if you're taking it back, that's fine as well. It's really your motion, so. Go ahead.
So when this deferral comes up, the mayor is putting a deferral through just to wait, put a halt on everything. We're not making any decisions or assumptions until the region gets theirs. But in this, it's saying staff return suggest school hours during. So we are suggesting it goes to 40 outside the limit, but we aren't, because that's not the deferral.
So the confusion is initially it seemed as if Councillor Ioannidis was going to put forward a motion.
That's right.
Then he said he's taking everything back. And at that point, from earlier comments, Mayor Ivanovich had suggested that he was interested in putting deferral on any upcoming motion that would have made any changes regarding speed limits around school zones. That aside, after that, Councillor Davey put forward his combined motion outlining the speed limit change on Bingham and Center Drive, as well as the same to the effect what Councillor Ioannidis wanted to do regarding, I guess, further review on the speed limits on school zones during off hours. So now really the question was, do we want to do it as a deferral, or does Councillor Davey just want to take that portion out, and then Mayor Ivanovich just puts as a motion, or as an amendment or a motion, that this report come back again once after the regional review?
I guess we're just anticipating what the region's going to do, and we don't know that yet, so I'm not sure that should be in the motion.
In tandem with the regional Waterloo discussion anticipated to be complete. Yeah, we don't know when it's anticipated. Do we? Do staff know?
Through the chair to the councillor, by the end of the year.
Well, that's why it says anticipated by the end of the year.
My apologies. I added that to allow some timing discussion, because right now this matter, if we're not doing a deferral, it's kind of...
It's a moot point. I get it.
A moot point.
I'm going to look at Councillor Davey because he had initially expressed some interest. So
It just provides some
are you
direction.
taking the later part out, or do you want to keep it in? And that way I'll go. Well, the staff return suggested school hours. The second paragraph. We're taking that out. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. I had moved in the first place for us to separate these two. I think it would have been a lot easier for us to just do that, and then we might have had one vote done by now.
I would have separated anyways. There was a lot of discussion coming as to
Okay.
does he want to articulate a motion and there's a deferral of the motion, or again, if he's planning on taking that part, the second part of his combined motion out. So that's really what I was waiting
I'm just
to
trying
get
to
at.
make it easier for
Yes,
you.
no, I appreciate that. A few years of experience, I'm good. So you're taking that out again, and Mayor Bevanovich, do you want to articulate again what your motion would have been or amendment? Sorry. Yeah.
Again, Mr. Chair, I didn't think we were going to be dealing with the school hour issue at all today. If we are, then I'm inclined, because I don't want to deal with anything before we have a report, we know where the region's going and so on. And so I think it's best to just defer the issue then if we're keeping that part in the motion. And I think the request has been made to separate these issues regardless, so.
Right.
So if that's staying in, if Councillor Davey wants that to stay in, then I will move a deferral on part 2.
Okay, all right. So defer? So you're going to keep it in? Excellent, I like that. So now that it's received, and now we know what I'm separating, I'll take the first paragraph of this motion as moved by Councillor Davey. So as it's already read, we're clear on it. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Now the second part is being deferred by Mayor Ravenovich up until the regional review is completed. On the deferral, so we don't have to have any issue on the timing or questions of the timing. All those in favor? Opposed? That too carries. Thank you. All right, that item is taken care of. That was fun. On to 6.2, Downtown Kitchener Draft Vision and Principles. Ms. Goss, you are presenting first, I believe. Oh, and Darren Becks. So either one of you or both of you. Go ahead. Darren, welcome.
Yes.
Whenever
Thank you,
you're
Chair.
ready. You got
Thank
two
you.
mics pointing at you, so you may want to just, should I leave one on, or? There you go.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I think we're organized now. My name is Darren Becks. I'm the manager of Downtown Development, and I'm here today with my colleague, Natalie Goss, manager of policy and research in the planning department. And we are presenting an update on our downtown visioning process and would like council's feedback as we move forward to next steps. So first today, our goal is to hear your comments and feedback regarding the draft vision and principles that were presented in the report. And for context, a quick recap. The DTK Vision and Principles project, including the project working group terms of reference, were approved by council in early 2022. And the Downtown Community Working Group was struck using an equity-seeking lens with broad community representation. In fact, we had 30 community members involved in the process and consistently had 20 to 25 participate in our meetings and sessions. The Downtown Community Working Group is led and is supported by staff and an external consultant, Lura Consulting. As noted in the staff report, in more detail within the comprehensive Phase 1 engagement report, extensive community engagement was undertaken. Noted on the slide, we had many engagements both online and in person, and community broad engagements to round out our Phase 1 engagement. That Phase 1 engagement ran from September 2022 through till June 2023. A second round of engagement asking for further feedback on the vision and principles as presented in the report was done through the Engage page, and we are continuing to receive that feedback through till the end of next week.
So we'll now go a little interactive with our presentation and get some council input as we move through the next few slides. So in addition to the community input, the Downtown Community Working Group and staff would like council input on the draft vision and series of principles for downtown Kitchener. So over the next few slides, we have a few questions for Committee of Council, and would like to obtain your input tonight on the draft vision and series of principles. After a series of discussions on a wide range of topics from October to March, and in consideration of community input from Phase 1, the Downtown Community Working Group, with staff and consultant support, has drafted the following vision. It's on the slide there. The vision statement is also located on page 81 of your agenda package if you prefer to read it as part of the staff report. So we now turn the discussion over to you. We have one question posed, and Chair Singh will kind of turn it back to you on how to facilitate this conversation a little bit. The question is, does this vision establish a clear direction for the future of downtown Kitchener?
Natalie, would you like to take clarification questions as well? Yeah. And so, again, if you can key in, if you want more clarification, you're welcome to ask staff more specific to this question first, and then make your comments also. Mayor Vivinovich.
Thanks. So in general, I like it, I think. I think what I feel like it's missing is that I'm not clear that it speaks to it kind of belonging to the whole community. I guess the question is our community referred to the downtown, or does it refer to the whole city? Because the downtown belongs to the whole city, and somehow I think that second line needs to reflect that. I don't know what the right wording would be, but there's probably more eloquent people than me to figure that out.
Does staff want to reply to that, or are you good with just taking that as a feedback? Okay, excellent. Anything? Okay, good. Councillor Michaud?
I like it, but I would go downtown Kitchener is the heart of the city, and then I'd go on, it's an exclusive dynamic. So identify downtown Kitchener as being the heart of the city, so then you're incorporating it in as the whole city. Make sense?
It's another idea. They're going to take all our ideas and just mix it all together. Good. Anything further? You good? Okay. Councillor Donnell.
Thank you, Chair. I guess, when we use the word inclusive, there's a segment of the population who obviously will disagree with that we are an inclusive city. I believe we are, but there's a certain population who will throw that back at you and say, we're not included in this, we're not included in that. So I'd be hesitant. I think you need to have that in there, but I think we have to be ready for some blowback using that word in the division. I guess I would argue at this point in time, I think it is becoming more dynamic and more energetic. I don't think it's there yet. I think the Gaukel Street area is dynamic and energetic. I think the parts in around City Hall, they can be, but they're not necessarily there. And so I'm not saying you have to reword it. I'm just saying if I were to look at that as a citizen who doesn't live in the downtown core, I would question, well, what makes it dynamic and energetic? I've been down there before. There's not many places open for lunch. There's no music. Maybe there might not be any vibrancy. It's a concrete slab outside of City Hall. So I'm just looking at those words and thinking about what other people might be thinking.
Councillor Clancy.
Yeah, I think when we were part of the DAC chat, we were hoping to find something with a little more punch, that it wouldn't sound like other vision statements from other cities. So while I love the word thrive and vibrancy, just wondering if we can kind of find something that has a better punch and is memorable. You know, we're trying to be bold with our entertainment, and this sounds lovely, but I wonder if we could be bolder, because I think we really want to, yeah, we're being ambitious, but this may not quite, it doesn't convey that same ambition, but like, yeah, same idea, but maybe tighter and punchier and ambition.
Just maybe a quick comment through the chair. This is consistent with what we've heard from our other feedback, and certainly our Downtown Action Advisory Committee shared some of the same sentiments, and I know both Councillor Clancy and Councillor Chapman were a part of that discussion. The intent here really is for the vision to be visionary and for us to aspire to. So I think getting the words right and the context right will be important next step. So thank you.
Okay, no one else is in, so I'll say the same. I get that. It's a visionary statement, but to some kind of change in saying we're not there yet, I get it. So perhaps the wordage should be aspirational rather than a statement, and that places the direction that we're heading and where the work needs to happen. And the other things that I would have liked to see was innovation, which is a big part of our downtown, incorporated, and downtown being as part of our major employment center, right, of a very changing dynamic economy where it's not going to be necessarily just outlying commercial and industrial spaces, but our downtown, a very nimble economy. And I think that should be a part of our aspirational goals. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I like what this is trying to do, but I don't know if we're being specific enough. Like how do we get vibrancy? How do we get connection? How do we get belonging? What is it that creates that? The events, the spaces. I think Gawker Block's done an amazing job. Like as far as connecting and having a place to go, it's a fun place. I think the storage units are a great innovation. The artwork on them is fantastic. The tables with the swinging chairs. So that I see as an absolute place of connection and belonging. But how do we extend that out past Gawker? How do we get that spirit up and running up and down King Street? So I think, what you're trying to do here, I like the words dynamic and energetic and inclusive. I love vibrancy, it's a great word, but just maybe how can we do that?
Okay, before we go to this, one more thing. From the rooftops to the sidewalk, it's about, the vibrancy is happening just not on the street front. As we have more density coming, we got these rooftops and, public, privately owned parks will be a part of our dynamic downtown as well. So something in that regard. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. I feel like this conversation has been had about 10 years ago when we were trying to do a vision and we were talking about downtown having grit and all of this kind of stuff. And it was kind of the same as it is right now, except we didn't have the tall high-rises and all that jazz, and we'll call it jazz, because there is lots of good things happening downtown. So I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, your draft vision is what you build on to energize the core to become what we envision it to be. So we know it's not all that this is it. This is what this vision is, but that's why it's called a vision. So we want it to be this, so we have to, say it, right?
Right.
Like build it and they will come kind of thing. We've done this before.
Councillor Denell.
Thank you, Chair Singh. And you're right, I'm sure you had this conversation a number of years ago, and has much action been taken on it? Maybe not, maybe a little bit. I think from July 1st till August 31st, I propose we close down King Street. We have permanent vendors there throughout the summer. I think if any indication of the Blues Fest and the Wayback Festival, like Councillor Michaud said, if we build it, they will come. And people flock to the downtown core, bring in energy and spending, money at local restaurants. And I think that's how we get to a downtown that's energetic and dynamic, inclusive for everybody, because you don't need any money to listen to the music. You just bring a lawn chair or sit on a stoop, and you get to listen to the music for free. And so I think that's the bold ideas we really need to push. I think so.
I would have loved to have this conversation throughout the whole day because I'm excited about this, but we can't have too much back and forth. But I'll quickly let you finish what you want to say. Go ahead, Councillor
No,
Bishop.
it's okay. You know what? You're right. It's getting late. We'll just carry on.
Okay, I appreciate that. We're all passionate. I love it. It's just great. I'm sure staff appreciate that as well. I'm guessing on to the next question. Oh, it's already up. Yes,
It's a good
there you go.
segue, because now we'll start talking about drilling into some of these words from the vision statement and getting into more of your thoughts and ideas about actions or where we can go next. So there are 3 draft principles, again developed by the Downtown Community Working Group with supportive staff and the team of engagement consultants. I'm going to flip to the next slide. So on page 81 of your agenda package are these principles and the exact wording. The questions that we have for you are, do the principles establish clear direction for the future of downtown Kitchener? Do the principles prioritize the matters that should be focused on to achieve the vision? And then what might be missing from them? And then, because we've spent the better part of 18 months trying to keep the Downtown Community Working Group staying away from actions and where do we go, because we wanted them to write the vision and the principles first, now we can start talking about, now you see some words on paper, how do we need to tweak those words, and then let's start brainstorming the actions that can be taken to implement the principles. And as staff, we've got some ideas. We know how we're going to use this for certain things that we know are in our work plan, but we're interested to start brainstorming those ideas and building on, council or committee of council's recommendation to council on the new strategic plan earlier today, and how this work can work together with the directions and the action items in the strategic plan and that vision, and how we can leverage this work on future action items. So I can either keep the questions up or the wording from the principles, whichever you'd prefer.
Have we all found the wording of the principles from our package? I was looking myself. I was having a tough time. 81? Okay. Is that the report that was included?
Yeah, so there's a PDF agenda package that has all the page numbers in it.
From the Downtown Kitchener Vision and Principles? PDF? Yeah. So unless others are having more success, I open it up, it only goes to page 4, 5, so. It could be the email, okay.
So I'll put the principles back up. Darren and I can kind of walk through the questions, easier than reading all of this. So we're interested first, before we move into actions, do we feel that the principles, so the 3 core focus areas, do they build enough on the vision to establish clear direction for where we should go? The other thing we should mention is we haven't set a particular time frame, so we haven't done, by 2031, by 2051, DTK should be, because we wanted to leave it a bit ambiguous. We didn't want to be hemmed in by a particular time frame. We wanted, free thinking around the Downtown Community Working Group and the community to be bold and dream big. So that's why there isn't, a date associated with it. But are these the 3 things that should be focused on? Do they prioritize the right things?
Okay, I'll go on to Councillor O'Dooney. And before I do, so the package, the PDF question is an email, so just received again. So if you want to open that up, and that way we can go back to the questions as well, just in case we end up forgetting. Councillor O'Dooney.
I am loud enough, so you probably would hear me. In terms of direction, I think vibrancy is it's something that I've been looking for, and I feel like we're starting to see it, and that is a direction that we're going, so I think that is wonderful. That's the right word, and I think that really gets the minds thinking in terms of what else can we do to make it more vibrant. Connection is a good one as well. I think those 2 things can lead to people having a sense of belonging at the end of the day. the actions that are put in place. So I don't know if you want me to wait in terms of action plans, because I started writing some thoughts down around all of them. So I'm going to use a side eye to look at my chair to see if I can continue.
No, I think it'll be better for you to carry on. So.
Okay, sounds good. For example, we have so many students that are now schooling, downtown here. I think this is such a perfect opportunity for us. How do we engage them in that vibrancy? What can we do to pull them outside of school hours and when they're not working, quote unquote, to stay within the downtown core? What are some of those things that we can start doing to engage them? And there is a particular demography that is within that as well. So what is it that would they be interested in as well? So that way, we're able to keep people in the downtown. I feel like for me, that's the thought process. How do we keep people here? Not they just come for an hour and then head back home. How do we keep them hanging around here for quite a while? Because that's when they go to the restaurants, that's when they spend some time, that's when they hang out with one another. And that leads to connections at the end of the day as well. And I think something that I also notice, how do we connect people? We bring people together, which is great, but how do we get them to face one another, to have conversations, to chat with one another, to high-five one another, get to know one another a bit better? I think that's that next level. Bringing them together to a party is awesome, but how do we ensure that the person standing next to the other person gets to say, hey, hi, I'm Io, hi, I'm Barry, that type of thing? That's when you start creating that sense of belonging for people, because then they will say, oh, it is special. But right now, we're having those amazing, vibrant type events, but the timeline is limited. And then also, we're bringing people together, but can we spur connection? Can we push that as well? That's the part that I don't know how. Can we bring Bollywood stars? Because we have more and more people coming from India that are going to be in our downtown. I see 2 Indian restaurants opening downtown. That's great. That means more of the students will stay downtown. But how can we pull them and keep them here long term as well? So those are just some thoughts that come to my mind. But in terms of direction and the words that are here, I like them. I always get a bit sensitive about the word belonging, because we're such a diverse city that you're bound to find a group that feels like you're not bringing someone from, a musician from their country to come represent here. And it's going to be hard to cater to 200 different tribes and nationalities and whatnot. So I get a bit hesitant about the word belonging, but if we create a vibrant economy, if we push people to connect with one another, then belonging can come. So I don't know, do we take out the word belonging? That's just my personal opinion. I think it's something that we can create as an end result, but put it there, from the onset, people are going to start complaining and having issues with that word. So just my 2 cents on that.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, just for assistance, in case everyone hasn't pulled it up, if you can just swing between the questions and then the draft principles. So just before, when someone starts speaking, they can have a quick review, and then going on to the draft principles where they can kind of reflect on. Okay, so Councillor Johnston, you'll have the questions up for a bit, and then you'll see the draft principles, okay?
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I think I love vibrancy. That is one of my favorite words. And I recently did an economic development course, and they said, every single community says, live, work, and play. So thank you for not saying that. We want a vibrant community, and I think that's such. I think that we have that, and I think we still need to attain that at the same time. I find the belonging and connection, I find those 2 words are actually very similar to me. So I could put those 2 together. I can certainly link connection and belonging. So I think maybe a third piece around, when I think of vibrancy, I do think about economic vibrancy, but I don't know that that piece is in here kind of enough. Like, we want a booming downtown. We want people, we want our businesses to thrive. We want our people to thrive. We want things going on all the time. We want activity. And vibrancy, I guess, would best encapsulate that. But I think the other two are absolutely what's needed, but they're a little similar. So, and I always agree with going with 3 words. I think that that's always important as well. I don't know what that word is, but I think expressing something about, you know, everybody is able to be lifted up in this community because people are doing well. That to me is important. I don't know really how to put that necessarily into words, but I think not even necessarily prosperity, but that people can succeed in our community, that it's vibrant, you belong, and you're moving forward and succeeding here is important. Do the principals prioritize the matters that I think honestly the piece of bringing everybody along and having everybody be successful is kind of missing here. I mean, it's belonging, I guess, is one thing, but it's not just about belonging, it's that people have a chance to be successful. And at the moment, I feel that that is something to aspire to, for sure. Actions are something I haven't really had that opportunity to think about yet, but yeah, that's kind of how where I am with this. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Michaud.
Thanks. I just have a question. When you had the group working on this, was there ever any conversation about like building back? I mean, we're coming out of COVID. We've come out of almost 2 years of a pandemic, and the downtown got hit hard. And businesses got hit hard.
Councillor Michaud, if you can just speak into, yeah.
I'm talking to them.
I know, but Councillor Davey wants to hear you, so.
Sorry. Yeah, we're coming out of a pandemic, and you know, the downtown got hit hard, business got hit hard. We are building back. I mean, the the buildings are rising, you know, so was there any conversation around that with when you planned this?
Through the chair. The working group, with the help of the consultant, worked through 11 set themes, 2 of which were business recovery and business support and future business. It was a very interesting conversation. The detail would be in the full engagement report, but certainly the Downtown Community Working Group heard from business owners, heard from developers, heard from the post-pandemic context. What starting a business looks like, the risks, the threats, the opportunities. So I think that's definitely going to be a component of our action plan going forward.
I guess just, and this will be the last comment I'll make maybe, is it's a lot of rejuvenation. Yes, that's a good word, rejuvenation. This is good, but to me it's a lot of the same that we've had before. And again, I'll go back to coming out of a pandemic. We need a little more than this, I think. I don't know. The words are the same as before, kind of, right? And is the working group, are they the businesses that have been here for a long time, or like, was it all different? It was probably in the report. I'm sorry.
Through the chair. It was a combination. Okay. So some established businesses, some newer business owners, and then we also heard from the BIA. The BIA was actively involved in the process.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Vavanovich.
Can you turn me back on? Thank you. So, you know, I think in principle, I mean, I like the 3 words. I think they're the right ones. A few concepts that are missing, I think, a little bit for me. We talked about unique places and, you know, a few other things. I think placemaking is something that should be in here. You know, when we talk about belonging, we talk about it being a place where everyone belongs, but maybe like to see it specifically reference sort of the notion of, you know, the organization 880, sort of, you want it to be a place from where our kids to our older adults belong and everything in between. And, I think it merits actually specifically stating that. In terms of sort of things to focus on, I think we've been very fortunate that we embarked on a path before the pandemic that focused on residential, and that I think has helped us immensely now as we deal with the impact of the pandemic and folks not, particularly in the tech sector and others, fully returning back to the office, which continues to have an impact. And, unlike places like downtown Toronto, where it's primarily business right in the downtown core, and you're seeing a lot of empty, everything, at least, while we're seeing some slowdowns at lunches, our evenings are busier. And so I think that has been a good thing, but now we need to really focus on trying to find that right mix of things to both support that evening and weekend crowd, as well as continue to work with all sectors to try to get people, back to the office as much as possible. And so, part of that, I think, is doing is really being aggressive in terms of our business recruitment strategy for the downtown. I just heard today that Yorkdale is planning a huge expansion, their first one in, I don't know, something like, this is in Toronto, obviously, but their first one in something like 8 or 10 years in a world where, brick and mortar retail is changing, and yet they're looking at a big expansion. So that tells me there's still a market for it, and we just need to figure out what that market is, and be aggressive in terms of going after it. And I think we need to have some real timelines there, so there, within reason, so that there is actually something to measure against.
Thank you. I guess we got to get those Gucci and Prada outlets here in our downtown as well.
You'll have a place to shop.
I don't know, not me. Councillor Clancy.
I wanted to echo what Councillor Owaduni was sharing, just around maybe rethinking the word belonging, maybe using the word equitable versus sometimes I think Councillor Chapman was talking about how moving away from words like diversity and inclusion and equity really encapsulates all of that, and I think it expresses more nuance in terms of the different stakeholder groups. I think the full range of accessible transportation is more of an action, but maybe not. But one of the actions towards that is, if I think of folks who use a wheelchair, could we make sure that spaces are accessible? So an action could be having folks with mobility needs move through our downtown and give us feedback before things get built, even sometimes, instead of after the fact, and have it corrected. So that would be an action. And I just feel like I want people to come downtown, and I think just a word I'd use, like Councillor Johnston was sharing, was just reaching your potential. If I think of our different stakeholder groups, we all are in our pockets. There's a group at St. Andrews there's newcomers from India, there's, mixed workers that come. So is there a way that we can try to have people network outside of those demographics, so that they're not, like you said, not just being in the same space, but actually sharing their life experiences or getting to know each other. I don't know how to express that, but not only do we want everyone to come down here, but it'd be nice if our kitchen table was a bit broadened as a result of that. I don't know. Yeah, we kind of stay in our same type of person group, and how do we disrupt that in the way that our strategic plan did when they were getting all the voices in the resident panel. How do we make our downtown like our resident panel? That would be maybe the action item, is creating those opportunities. But yeah, so reaching potential, using the word equity instead of maybe belonging, because I think that speaks to a broader group and is less touchy-feely and more real. And then just trying to understand how people have their needs met, like well-being keeps being the #1 thing people want. How does coming downtown create well-being? I think of folks that are displaced, who are drug users, or folks who are isolated. How do we make downtown a place where people can get what they need to reach their potential? So just trying to, because I think sometimes when we overflower things, we're ignoring the fact that there's an encampment downtown, you know, and how do we reconcile that in our vision? You know, like, we're going to pretend it doesn't exist in our vision, or are we going to try to find a way to weave the hope for folks displaced in encampments into the vision of the city? So yeah, just feeling like it doesn't represent some of those groups, and maybe those suggestions could include the more marginalized, especially in our communities.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I'm okay with the words. Where I'm a little fuzzy is when we're describing downtown, are we talking like if I read the other action things, that are we talking about the people who live downtown, just to live downtown, or those who come downtown for an event? Like, if we're saying that the downtown is the heart of the city, then it needs to be a place where there is vibrancy and there are events, and it's really interesting and educational to me to hear you know, people like Councillor O'Dooney talk about belonging, like wanting people to belong. And if you're living downtown, I think it's easier to get that sense of belonging. But belonging comes, you know, it's, people are saying, getting out of the silos, having something, a shared passion. Like I've heard Councillor Deneau tell me about his group of Pittsburgh Steelers fans who get together. They bond over the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's their common passion. And they're diverse. There's all sorts of different backgrounds and political sides, but they all come together and get along over this. They belong because they've got that shared passion. So could there be some form of, you know, shared passions, shared things to connect over with for those that come downtown? When I come downtown for events, I feel a strong sense of connection with my city. I'm standing in a crowd, and usually it's a pretty diverse crowd, age-wise, culture-wise, and I'm really proud to say, this is my town. I belong here. You belong here. We belong here. This is us. So it's those kinds of events and the spaces, like the Gaukel Block. I mean, that's a great start. The artwork that represents the you know, different expressions, that's all part of a little sign that you belong here or you connect here. You know, it's exciting, but you know, I guess for those that live downtown, yeah, I want them to have that place to connect. But sometimes, you know, even in the suburbs, like how far do we all know our neighbors? Two to each side of us, a few across the street, and how do we make that same belonging, that same connection in the suburbs? So. I guess I look at it in two ways. Downtown is our heartbeat. It's our place to come when we want to celebrate. We've come downtown to show compassion over tragic events. We have great cultural things like the Mila Festival and our Rotunda. And that's a different culture. I attend. I feel I belong. I feel accepted and connected when I'm there. They want to share their culture, their music, their food, their dance with me, and I embrace it. And I think there's a lot of us who are that way, so the more opportunities and diverse events and opportunities to come downtown and express that and experience that is great. That's why I think the Multicultural Festival is so awesome. Like, everybody comes together and enjoys the food, the music, the dance, the culture. And we're all together, we're all one, we're all Kitchener. So I think there's a lot of exciting things that you can build on. And as far as the actions, I would copy what we heard from the Plan With Us resident panel for the strategic plan. Brought diverse people together. They understood, they listened, as they said, listen, and look at the results, the consensus that was built for that. So for me, there's a lot of excitement and optimism. I've got a lot to learn. I want to do that and embrace that as well. So that's where I am.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you. It's a brave thing to come in and ask a bunch of politicians to wordsmith, I think. So, this is, so I'm going to take my shot. No, just some thoughts in random order. If you're looking for some consensus too, I would agree with a couple of my colleagues, Councillor O'Dooney and Councillor Johnson as well. That I do think, if you're looking at refining and simplifying, I do think connection and belonging could be sort of combined into one item. But also agree with Councillor Singh. I know it's a bit of a overused term today, but I still think it's relevant in terms of what I think of vibrancy, and that's innovation. I think that's what we do in this community. I think of some of the things we've done that have added to the vibrancy of the downtown, like the Gaukel's been brought up a number of times, innovative idea. We trucked sod in, built a park. Like, these are the sorts of things that that are innovative ideas that actually create that vibrancy. A few years back, going back, I literally had a mayor from a neighboring municipality contact me and ask how we got our patio program functioning so well in the day. It was, again, it was innovation on our part. So if we can work that into, I think it sort of touches upon the whole startup creative culture that we have in this community as well. So yeah, just those are my 2 cents, but I do appreciate the work on this. I'm looking forward to what you guys come up with.
Councillor Denneau.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Schneider. Pittsburgh Steelers fans are the best fans in the world, and so we were able to put aside our differences. But in all seriousness, when I go back to the draft vision, I think a word, if we're looking to kind of connect a couple of these words and a couple of the principles, I think resiliency. I think resiliency of the downtown core, from what I've heard from years before, when we had, manufacturing downtown, we had tanneries downtown, to where, there was a bit of an adjustment in the 80s and 90s to where we are now, where we're tech, we're innovation. And so the resiliency of the downtown, and that involves the people of Kitchener, I think is something we really need to be proud of, and I think we need to really push to people who are looking to move here, that we are a resilient community, even after the pandemic, where we have all these buildings coming up, and so it doesn't matter what is thrown at us as a city, we're resilient enough, and we have the people here that care and want to make and to continue to make the city a great city. And so I think if you can maybe somehow add that in there, that's all. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. So there are 2 things that come to my mind when I think about the vision of downtown, and they're not positive things, I hate to say. And the one is people are being driven out of the downtown because of cost. They might be rent-evicted, they might be displaced because of a new building that's about to be built. Even businesses are being displaced and finding it difficult to afford staying in downtown. So that worries me. It's fine to talk about, vibrancy, connection, belonging. And in fact, under belonging, I think that's where this affordability thing would fit, but I don't think we're getting it right. So I do worry about that. And the other item that often comes up, and we've heard it over and over again, is our green spaces, the lack of green spaces in downtown. And this is part of the, the tree canopy, the lacking of tree canopy in wards 9 and 10. And so it's fine to, run programs and get people in the core, but they're here for a few hours and then they're gone. And how do you fill those, and I don't have any answers. All I can say is that, I think every socioeconomic bracket should be able to live downtown, be part of downtown. We talk about students. I've seen students at the food bank, right? So can they even afford the service that, the stores that are emerging in the downtown core? So, I don't know. I have, when we talk about visions and principles, if we don't have a clear image of what we're doing, building 1+10 high-end condo buildings in the downtown, it's not just about coming downtown and going to an event, it's about living downtown, being part of downtown. And I think that's the part of the puzzle that we're overlooking. And of course, there's no quick, easy solution. So that's all I'll say. Thank you.
And that's everyone. I'll just include a little bit of my points as well. My perspective, this exercise is not about outlining the needs of Ward 9 and Ward 10. Those needs are many. They will continue to be many. It's more to identify, how do we improve the downtown in respect to everyone, inclusive of our city, where that's the heart of our city. So in that context, it's really about what's happening here. It's not really inclusive if you're coming down maybe because there's one event that happens a year that, that interests you, and then there's quite a bit here and in between that doesn't. If there's enough happening, it will continue to attract you over and over again into downtown. And that in its sense, maybe you don't feel it yourself, but over time, with your participation, you start feeling like this is your neighborhood as well. So maybe that's what it should be. Downtown, your neighborhood also, right? No different than their neighborhood park. That's how our downtown should feel to the rest of our residents. They should not feel where the significant, tremendous investments that happen in our city tend to happen in our core that are happening at the cost of residents that are 80% living outside the downtown. They also have a buy-in. They also want these investments to carry forward because they will see that those investments improve and reflect on their life as well because of what's happening here. So I think that would be, whatever statements would be most accurate to encapsulate that. That would be my ideas. Thank you. Okay, on to the next thing.
Great, thank you very much. We were feverishly writing down all kinds of comments and feedback, and we will definitely take this back to the committee and the working group and the consultant, and we'll roll this all up, and we will be back to you later in the fall. But there is a recommendation in our package, and would maybe just get council's direction on next steps.
Okay, that's excellent. So in that case, for the recommendation, I'll get a mover. Moved by Councillor Johnston. She had her hand up first. We've all said a fair amount. With that, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to our end of our committee. Can I get a mover to adjourn? Councillor Michaud, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Thank you to staff and those viewing.